Thank you. Good morning. Our text for this morning comes from Romans chapter 8, verses 18 through 25. Paul writes, I believe that the present suffering is nothing compared to the coming glory that is going to be revealed to us. The whole creation waits with breathless anticipation for the revelation of God's sons and daughters. Creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice. It was the choice of the one who subjected it, but in hope that the creation itself will be set free from slavery to decay and brought in to the glorious freedom of God's children. We know that the whole creation is groaning together and suffering labor pains up until now. And it's not only creation. We ourselves, who have the Spirit as the first crop of the harvest, also groan inside as we wait to be adopted and for our own bodies to be set free. We were saved in hope. If we see what we hope for, that isn't hope. Who hopes for what they already see? But if we hope for what we don't see, we wait for it with patience. This is the reading of this holy and sacred word. God's people did say, Amen. Now, just to be very, very transparent, I have preached on this text 5 times in the last 2 or 3 years. Did you remember that? And honestly, if you were paying close attention, I conducted 12 funerals in this room last year and made references to that text. But I don't expect anybody to remember that because, heck, I can't even remember what I preached last week. I mean, what was it? Anybody remember? I don't. Psalm 23, that's it, Psalm 23. No, it wasn't even that. I can't even remember. That was 2 weeks ago. When I was a student at Vanderbilt, I would drive 100 miles every weekend down to Waynesboro, Tennessee, where I preached at this little church. And there was a woman, an older widow lady, who lived in a little home and invited me to stay at her house on the weekends so I could preach and do the service. And she was an interesting person. I loved her because she always had a pint of ice cream in her refrigerator for me when I got there. But after her husband died, she moved her bed into a closet, and every night when she would go to sleep, she would go in the closet, get in bed, and shut the door. I never asked her why. There was no explanation. But she was a great cook. Every Sunday morning, she prepared me a wonderful breakfast for preaching. Country ham, homemade biscuits, homemade jelly, sausage gravy, eggs. Fantastic meal. And she would tell me every Sunday that her job and purpose in life was to feed their little preacher. And one Sunday, I said to her, Miss Trail, Miss Nowlin, I'm going to be preaching twice today at our church and at the Baptist church for that community service. And I'm going to be preaching the same service twice because I'm in school. I don't have time to write 2 sermons. Do you think anybody will mind? And she says, without even batting an eye, no one remembers what you say anyway. And I don't think it was her memory. I think it was the content and the delivery. But I keep coming back to this passage in Romans 8, especially right now in the world we're living in. When I'm disgruntled, when I'm discouraged, when I'm disappointed, when I'm needing direction, when I'm needing a little boost to hoist me up in difficult times, when I need to be reminded of who I am and what I'm called to do and who I'm called to be and what the church is for, I go to this text. Because here in the middle of Romans 8, the middle of Romans, Paul gives us The fullest explanation of the gospel and the good news, God at work in our world, bringing Jew and Gentile together, the work and the purpose of Christ on the cross, good news. And goodness for sakes, we know right now, does our world need some good news? I mean, we are hungry for good news. Last week I spoke to 3 different individuals working at 3 local food pantries. All 3 of them said something of the same thing. David, we've never seen anything like it. The moment we open our doors to the moment we close the doors, people are lined up for food. Mothers that are coming in and having to make decisions about whether or not to pay their rent or buy their groceries. Our world is hungry for good news. The other day I had a conversation, and this is a conversation I hear over and over again from another person who said to me, David, I've had a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance, a fifth chance, and I just can't help myself. I just keep making mistakes and suffering the consequences of my actions. I'm about ready to give up on myself, and she's about to lose her housing, the place where she stays. And when I heard her say that, I thought of a passage that comes up early in Romans in the chapter before where Paul says something like this. He says, I don't know why I do what I do. I want to do the right thing, but there's a war going on inside of me. Who's going to deliver me from this misery that I find myself living in and deliver me from the worst of myself? Now, when I hear that woman's story and when I hear Paul say that, I think, that sounds like me. Does that sound like you? Because our world right now is hungry for good news, hungry for hope, hungry for deliverance. And that's why I keep coming back to this passage, because Paul, the apostle, he gets it. He gets us. So if you drug yourself into the sanctuary this morning carrying the weight of concern over a medical diagnosis, if you're weary of trying to make ends meet, if you're worried about the world that your children are living in and you're fearful for the future, if you have just been weighed down, beaten down by the political bickering that's dividing us and leaving people hungry and wanting, then this is a word for you. Because Paul begins here in verse 18, he just describes it. He says, our present struggles. He's not minimizing it. He's not looking away. He's calling our present struggles what they are. They are simply defined by one word by Paul. It's our suffering. And let me be very clear. Paul here is not, with this text when he says the future glory outweighs the present troubles, he's not pointing his finger at you and scolding you for not being more hopeful and more motivated and more positive. No, because Paul himself is writing from a position of pain and struggle. Because you got to remember, Paul was not some motivational speaker all hyped up on caffeine, over-caffeinated, paid 50 grand to speak to your life in a motivational speech that has nothing to do with you. And you know those motivational speakers, they're kind of like a 16-ounce drink of Red Bull. 30 minutes later, you're worn out and tired and need to take a nap. Because Paul speaks from a different place. Paul speaks from the place of pain and suffering. Imprisoned, beaten, shipwrecked. Someone who is betrayed by friends. And when Paul talks about our current struggles, he's writing this from the place of despair. Now, this is interesting. This grabs me. Because 3 times he uses this word in the text. Evocative, emotional, powerful word. He uses the word groaning. You ever just groan with the struggle. And he says this most astonishing thing. He says this. He says, not only do we live in these present struggles, but he says, the whole creation is groaning. It's not just you. It's not just me. The whole world is groaning in anguish and waiting for something to be born, subjected to frustration. Because we live in a world where our bodies wear out, our minds grow weary, where anxiety hangs over us, relationships fracture, and we live in a world where the way things are stacked, the odds are just stacked against some people. We live in a system that is inherently unfair. Drive down 51st, go down Harvard, turn down 51st, pull into the drive-through window at the Taco Bell there. There's a woman working through the window that you see through the window who will hand you your tacos. She's got 2 children. She's a single mom. She makes $15 an hour, but she doesn't get full-time because Taco Bell doesn't want to pay her benefits and insurance. So she makes somewhere around $27,000 a year on a good year. Let me ask you then, how do you feed 2 children and provide for them medically on $27,000 a year? But meanwhile, the person that pulls through the drive-thru in their nice $70,000 SUV pulls in the window and doesn't understand the struggle of the woman through the window, doesn't understand her pain, doesn't understand her struggle, doesn't understand this woman behind the counter who is so polite and respectful and doing her job every day to provide for her kids, but who would complain if we raised the price of the tacos pushed through the window to give that woman a living wage. While we enjoy our tacos, the rest of the world groans. You see, we live in this broken, inherently broken world of broken systems. It's not just our pain, it's pain that's also inflicted on us through the system. And Paul here in this text, what does he say? He says this other profound thing. He said that we, as God's children, we inwardly groan in our spirits. And I love that because what Paul is doing here is he is taking this from the realm of just being some individual text about your individual delivery from your suffering and pain, and he's connecting you to every living thing on this planet and on this earth. That you're not suffering alone, that you're connected. That is the language of faith, to say that as the world groans, we groan. As we struggle, the world struggles. He's saying that every single living, breathing thing on this planet is connected. And if one suffers, we all suffer. We groan, waiting for something new to be born. Now, you can't understand the next part until you've grasped the first part. Because if you haven't sat with your ache for a while, or reflected on your suffering and lived through your suffering and embraced it and recognized it, then what Paul says next just comes across as kind of a bumper sticker cliche. He says the present sufferings are nothing compared to the future glory that is to be revealed. You see, I want to be very clear here. This is not just a Hallmark card, feel better, it's bad, you're going to die, and someday you'll go to heaven. That promise is rooted in a creation that's groaning. He's describing the work of our Savior, Jesus Christ, who entered into the suffering. And so when Paul talks about the glory, what's he talking about? He's saying, what is that glory? It's not a Hallmark card. It's God's promise that the groaning has an endpoint. The groaning has an endpoint. It's the promise of resurrection, not just for Jesus, but for your body that's failing you, that anxiety that won't let you go, that family that's fractured, that cancer that's eating your good cells. But it's more than this. Creation. It involves everything, not just us as human beings. And what he says here essentially too is also that this good news of God involves the whole creation, the whole cosmos, every living thing that lives and breathes on this earth. The land that you live on, that you walk on, the earth beneath your feet, the sky above you, every living, breathing thing, the whole world and everything in it, all of it, it says in Psalm 24, belongs to the Lord. And he says here that God is working toward a day when all of it will be redeemed. And one of the problems we have as Christians, let's just be honest, is that we have treated the world like it's disposable, like we're just passing through, ignoring it, that everything in this world belongs to God, is created by God, and ultimately God, when God returns, that God is going to restore all of it in heaven as on earth as it is in heaven. Last summer, I hiked 50 miles of the Pacific Crest Trail in the high Sierras in Northern California. It was definitely out of my comfort zone. Imagine this. Several days on the trail with no one to talk to but yourself. No cell phone, no books, no entertainment, no music. Just me and God and me. And honestly, sometimes I'm even too much for myself. At night, I was able to look at the beautiful array of stars. In the morning, I watched the sun come up. I drank water from a stream that I filtered. One of the highlights of the trip for me is I was coming through a ridge and going up the side of a mountain to an alpine lake. A thunderstorm was rumbling behind me. I got there just in time to set up my tent and to lay there and rest in my tent as the rain and the wind pelted my tent and the sound of the thunder echoed through the mountains, rolling over the top of me. And after a few days, kind of a stillness came upon me. And I have a hard time describing it, and it's emotional for me. This is not theology, this is just real. That in that moment of stillness, I just realized that I belong to this world we all belong to, we're all connected to everything, all of creation, and that God has God's hand on everything. I'm a cancer survivor. More than a decade ago, I went through chemotherapy and treatment for lymphoma. And since then, if you've been through cancer, you know this is true. Anytime you go to the doctor, that thing comes back in your head and the worry gets you. Even as a person of faith, is it going to come back? Am I going to get it again? Am I going to be sick again? Am I going to be able to finish what God wants me to do with my life? And after my mom died, and again, I'm a person of faith. After my mom died 2 summers ago, I lived for a period of time with just kind of an anxiety of death. Now, I'm not worried about dying or what happens to me. I'm just worried. I love my wife. I love you. I want to do my work. But there was something simple in the stillness of sitting there in creation and enjoying what God had created and recognizing to remember this real hope that everything in all creation belongs to the God that created us and made us and loved us, that we're all connected, and that at the end of all things, the groaning has an end, that there is resurrection, that there is hope for all of us. Now, notice this. Paul says, all of creation is waiting with breathless anticipation for the children of God to be revealed. I think you know what that's like. You know what it's like when a son or daughter gets married and the door opens and you see your daughter walk into the room in that white gown, and or you applied to the college you wanted to go to, you got the letter in the mail and you're waiting to open it and you're holding your breath. Or you're in the delivery room. Your son and daughter is about to be born. And there's all the struggle, the pain, and the struggle of giving life to a new life. And then in that moment when the child arrives, in that silence, the breathless anticipation, waiting for the baby to cry. Paul is saying, this whole world is in the delivery room, experiencing the labor pains, about to give birth to something new. And the whole world is waiting in breathless anticipation for God's sons and daughters to be revealed to the world. Turn to the person beside you now and say, I think he's talking about you. Sons, he's talking about you and he's talking about me. That God's choice to bring healing to the world is, he calls us the first fruits of the creation of the new thing that God is doing, that we live in the world as people of hope, and that God has invested in you and me and all of us, those through the grace and love of Jesus Christ has called us to be a part of the healing of the creation, the first fruits of what God is doing that point to the future and the present, the not yet, the now. What does that look like? It looks like our identity as children is revealed through our actions. Mercy, love, kindness, justice. What does it look like? Empathy that becomes a spiritual discipline. Generosity that is a way of life and a way of living. Not charity, generosity, two different things. It means that we choose to live by a different story. The world looks at the hard realities of life and they respond to it with pessimism. What's the point? The world looks at the world around us and the suffering and responds to narcissism. I'm going to get what I can. The world looks at the world around us and responds with optimism. I hope it will be better. But the children of God revealed to the world, look at the world, face the pain and the struggle, and then we live in hope, the hope that hoists us up to be the people that God has called us to be. People who forgive when the world says get even. People who give when the world says hoard. People who love when the world says hate. The people that invite everyone to the table. Now I remind you this important reality that our status as God's children, it's not an entitlement. Church, it's not a golden ticket to some gated community that you only leave now and then to give out charity and then return to your compound and to your little bubble. It's not an entitlement. It's not a favored status. It's a calling and a commission and a responsibility. And don't get a big head, because He didn't choose you, didn't choose me because we were good or better than or favored, or because we believe the right things. The reason you were chosen is because of the goodness and the love and the grace of a God that came in the person of Jesus Christ and entered into human suffering and is calling anyone and everyone who would dare to believe that this world belongs to our God, that breathes in His life and believes the resurrection hope. For as Paul says in Romans 8, at the end of 8, that there is nothing in all creation that will ever separate us from the love of God that is ours in Jesus Christ. That's the good news. That's the good news. And the whole world is waiting. I think you got it.